Mr. President, dear Emmanuel, ladies and gentlemen, dear guests and journalists, I am overjoyed to be able to welcome the President of the French Republic, Emmanuel Macron, in Ukraine. It's been 24 years since we had a visit from a French head of state, and we are honored by this visit, and we've been waiting for you, and we thank you for your personal support for Ukraine. It is true that our countries have been developing relationships in different domains, especially in the field of security. France has been playing a very important role in the Normandy format, and we truly appreciate Paris's position and Emmanuel Macron's personal position in striving for peace in Ukraine. This is an essential, a crucial question of our talks today, and we hope that in the very near future we will be able to reach all the goals that had been set in December 2019 and be able to have a new meeting of the Normandy format heads of states. We had a meeting between the political advisors that bore many fruit, and we expect that the meeting on the 26th of January 2022 and the Berlin meetings will be able to bring us closer to these goals. We have a common vision with President Macron of the current threats, the threats to Ukraine's security and to the world's security in general. What is needed is the unity of all the players and the end to the occupation of part of our territory is extremely important. Our partners' support to reinforce Ukraine's defense capacity is very important for the entire region. And the support from a security and an economic point of view by our European allies is crucial for us, and we really appreciate the West's position and the steps that they've taken. 1.2 billion euros in macro-financial help has been earmarked for Ukraine, which will help us stabilize our economy. And this is a very strong step in order to ensure stability and the economic resilience of our country. It is important that France participate in this large project, infrastructure project, among others. And I'd like to underline the fact that France has been supporting the reinforcement of our infrastructure and to better our citizens' living conditions. We are working together to implement an important project in order to purify the water in the country and to guarantee access to clean, good quality drinking water in the Luhansk region, which is very important for the million Ukrainians that live in this region. We have important projects underway. Alstom will be providing 130 locomotives to the tune of 130 million euros, and 300 fire trucks to the tune of 300 million euros will also be provided. There are also patrol vehicles for border guards that are being constructed, and Airbus is also working in order to create a air transport aircraft. And we have just signed an agreement with Oberon-Prom and the French company Thales. They have signed a common declaration this morning for the modernization of Ukraine's capacity. Thank you for these talks, and I'd like to personally thank Emmanuel Macron and France for these talks and for these initiatives. They will be able to foster important topics. And of course, the most important topic is the security of our country and Europe. And I'd like to thank you for coming here and supporting me and myself and the French and the Ukrainian state. The declaration of the French President Emmanuel Macron. Thank you very much, President Mr. Vladimir. Thank you for welcoming me here in Kyiv in this moment of grave tension for your country. Since the Maidan revolution in 2014, the Ukraine has chosen the way of reforms and democracy, and this choice was made by the Ukrainian people. They mobilized to reach this goal, and the European Union has been supporting your efforts to transform your country, which are a guarantee of your sovereignty. You know that you can count on our support in this regard. For 8 years, Ukraine has already transformed itself considerably. And this path that is walking down, and this is something we mentioned together, this is a path that from which there is no turning back. I'd like to pay homage to the demonstrators at the Maidan and for the thousands of dead soldiers who died defending their homeland. They fought for Ukraine, and I don't want to simplify things here. President Vladimir, I'll say what I said yesterday in Moscow. In the current context, your stiff upper lip and the stiff upper lip that the Ukrainian people have shown when faced with the military aggression that your country is faced with inspires respect. We will continue our efforts to mediate together with Germany between Ukraine and Russia in order to put an end to this conflict. We have been able to talk with President Putin and with Chancellor Merkel in the Normandy format in 2019, and the 4 leaders of the Normandy format agreed on immediate measures that had to be implemented, in particular when it came to military issues. On the 26th of December, the 4 countries reaffirmed their commitment to implement the Minsk protocol in order to give Ukraine its territorial integrity, and this draws the path of peace. Yesterday, in my talks with President Putin, I brought up this topic, and he committed to respect the Minsk Accords. I would like to thank you for repeating to me in our exchanges that you also have the will to implement these very same agreements. This shared determination is the only path forward that will allow us to build peace, the only path that will allow us to find a durable political solution. I would like to remind you that the foundation of the Minsk Accord of February 2015 is to guarantee Ukrainian sovereignty over the separatist regions of Luhansk and Donetsk. And so the Minsk Accords are also a guarantee of Ukraine's territorial integrity. Based on the shared Russian and Ukrainian commitment, we have in our grasp the possibility to move these negotiations forward. We lost a lot of time debating the different formats, the different means of negotiation, but I think we must all admit that all the participants of these negotiations act in good faith and commit to this. The path forward is possible, and our will, speaking for France and Germany, is to support you down this path. And so, as we will be working on the details, but I'm sure that we will be able to work forward very concretely when it comes to the different technical topics that we will have to deal with. You have also stated there will be a ceasefire, and a meeting of a Normandy format will take place this week in Berlin, and I would like them to be able to work on the different political measures. This process for solving the conflict will have to move forward independently of the different tensions on our continent and of the pressures exerted on your borders. But very clearly, on top of this process, there is today an unprecedented military pressure and new military exercises and a risk of escalation. Russia, having adopted this threatening posture, has very clearly decided to put pressure on the international community. I had the opportunity to bring this up with President Putin yesterday. And what I've done by going to Kyiv and Moscow aims to reinstate order, security and stability on our continent that has been shaken by this greater military build-up. I think personally that there are concrete practical solutions that will allow us to move forward. We had the opportunity to talk about this together, and I also had the opportunity to bring these matters up with President Putin yesterday. I also talked about this with our European partners. Our will for the following weeks and months is to stabilize the situation, to enable us to re-engage by using new mechanisms, new guarantee mechanisms to ensure de-escalation. The approach has to be measured, and all the stakeholders have to be moderated in their actions and in their words. You understand that our duty in the weeks ahead of us is to move forward down this path. First of all, we have to methodically and resolutely implement the Minsk agreements in the Normandy format. Secondly, we have to continue the dialogue. It has to be an innovative dialogue that will help us build shared guarantees, new guarantees that will help us build security and stability on our continent. And we will hopefully do this. We will do this preserving stability in the short term. We have also been strengthening our relationships between France and the Ukraine in the previous years. You mentioned it yourself, Mr. President, our economic, financial relationships in different fields such as health and civil security, infrastructures, equipments, and so on and so forth. I'm here in this atmosphere of great tension, but I also wanted to underline how much faith we have in strengthening your economy, and that's why we have decided to mobilize 1.2 billion euros in guarantees to finance various projects. Several agreements have been signed and others will be signed soon. We want to show our faith in your economy, in your projects, and this will be a guarantee of the security of your country. I'll conclude by stating that France's respect for the Ukrainian people's aspirations and our support for consolidating peace in Ukraine and in the entire region is steadfast. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. President. Now the journalist will have the opportunity to ask some questions. The Union Press Agency. Thank you very much. I'm Mr. Vitali from Union. I have a question to the French president. Yesterday you met with the Russian President Vladimir Putin, and today you are meeting Mr. Zelensky. In your opinion, these meetings and these conversations, this cooperation, have they brought the Normandy format leaders closer? And I also have a question for the Ukrainian president, Mr. Zelensky. Can you comment on what Mr. Putin said about the context of implementing the Minsk Accord? And the question is the following one. President Putin used a Russian proverb by saying that whether you like it or not, you're going to have to support it. I'd like you to comment these words, and what will your response be to what has been said? Thank you very much. Thank you very much for this question. I'll have to take this question very seriously. It's a very serious question. So I'll speak in Russian so that the author of this proverb understands my answer correctly. I think that's the right thing to do. When it comes to the Minsk agreement, whether you like it or not, sweetie, you'll have to put up with it. Well, without the shadow of a doubt, there are certain things which are difficult to debate with the Russian president. Ukraine is a very sweet country indeed, but when he says my sweetheart, I think he is exaggerating, isn't he? Yesterday after dinner, you didn't you stay a bit longer to see if what he was saying was serious or not? When he says my sweetheart, my pretty, I think that Ukraine is being very patient, and this shows our wisdom. And this is important not only for Ukraine, but for all of Europe in its totality. And it's also important for Russia, because the escalation on the other side also depends on our patience. And we are defending our country. We are on our territory, our soil, and our patience has an influence on these provocations. If we do not respond to any of these provocations, but we show that we have trust in ourselves. That's what I'm saying. Two things. When it comes to the discussions that I had with President Zelensky, they allowed us to move forward on the various means of building our security and stability in the region, and not to stay locked and trapped within unilateral, one-sided habits. This will take time, and we will need to decrease military tensions. But we need to work in depth in order to bring the different points of view closer together and to reduce tensions. We are talking about a geopolitical order that was built since the end of the Second World War, and about several decades of misunderstandings and disagreements. But I think it is useful to work in depth on these issues. And I think our communications in the last hours have allowed us to clarify various elements of the different positions and to decrease tensions. Second thing, during these conversations, I've been able to get the very clear and explicit commitment of President Putin and President Zelensky to implement the Minsk agreements and to respect certain procedures that are quite technical. I'm not going to get into the details right now, but we brought this up together, and also we brought it up with President Putin yesterday. And this will lead to exchanges in the tripartite contact group and in the discussions that will take place in Berlin. Things have to move forward based on a common understanding of the texts that have been signed, that was signed in 2015, and I think these exchanges will be possible. And if we can move forward with these discussions and in clarifying these texts, we'll be able to move forward in the coming weeks. But this will only be possible if we can also maintain calmness and security and stability, which is one of the main goals of these exchanges. Strongberg Agency, you have the floor. Bloomberg. I'm Agnes from Bloomberg. I have a question for President Macron. Yesterday, you stated that the Finlandization of Ukraine is one of the things that was on the table. What do you mean by this? And second thing, you said that you had obtained assurances on de-escalation from President Putin. But as of right now, the Kremlin has stated that there is no commitment on their behalf to freeze their military activities towards Ukraine. So would you have any precise elements to share with us? And are you maybe disappointed of the results of your exchanges with Mr. Putin? And for Mr. Zelensky, what are the first stages for implementing the Minsk Accords? And what did you think of President Putin during yesterday's press conference? Did you think he was more open than usual? Did this fill you with confidence or not? For your first question, well, actually for both questions that you've asked me, I did not use any of the wording that you used. You've never heard me use the word that you just said when it comes to the situation in the Ukraine. I just made a comparison by saying that closing NATO's open door policy would be a problem for several countries, including the Ukraine. But I only made this comparison, and I never actually brought up the kind of wording that you just used. I think it's important to make this clear. I didn't use these terms either in my talks with journalists or in the discussion. So I think you need to be very clear about the situation that we know. The situation, as we know it, is that there is a conflict between Russia and Ukraine. This situation has a framework, and that is the Minsk Protocol and the Normandy format. There is a situation that has gotten worse at the borders because of the deployment of troops and increased tensions. And there's a process linked to this, an exchange of letters between Russia and NATO, Russia and the United States of America. And at the heart of the discussion is the issue of NATO. These are separate issues. They're historically separate. But the question that underlies all this is the question of the collective security of measures of transparency and de-escalation in the whole region. This question can't be boiled down to NATO and its expansion. The question touches on many other topics and various measures of trust. And there's a conversation that we had that I had with President Putin, and he stated that we have to continue the dialogue. And we had exchanges yesterday, and we also had very rich exchanges today with the Ukrainian president on the ways and the means of being able to ensure that our values are respected. But we need to ask ourselves, what is the architecture we want to build? It has to respect the principles that we gave ourselves 30 years ago, the respect for state sovereignty, territorial integrity, and the rule of law. We signed this all together, Russia, France, and all the concerned states. And so this is the order that we are working within. As for the more security and military issues, I very specifically said yesterday, we had exchanges with President Putin, and he said that he would not trigger an escalation. I think this is something that is important. Commitments were made, and another commitment he made is that there would not be a permanent base or deployment in Belarus. I think this was also confirmed. As for the rest, nobody's being naive. The recent deployment is linked to a situation of tension, and you didn't hear me yesterday announce anything about this topic. We will be waiting for the fruit of a process that we have only started. You mustn't underestimate the tension that surrounds the situation we are living through and its unprecedented nature. France, since the beginning of the crisis, has never been excessive in its declarations. And in the same way, I do not believe that this crisis can be solved thanks to a few hours of discussions. And so that's why we've been working with our allies and European partners to ensure that our values are respected, the importance of sovereignty and territorial integrity in the region, and to start a new process. But it is in the coming days, weeks, and months that we'll be able to show progress. That is how I see things. Thank you for this question. I'm not sure if I really understood your question correctly. I'd like to be sure. Maybe you could. Well, actually, I will reword your question, and maybe the journalist can say if I've understood correctly. The Russian president yesterday was open during the press conference. Is that what you meant? Is that what did I understand you correctly? Yes, he was open. And so, what was the meaning of your question? So, what is your feeling? Do you have more confidence after this meeting as to the de-escalation of the conflict? Thank you very much. The way I see things is, quite frankly and openly, that yesterday I didn't actually watch the press conference. I didn't have the time to do that. How do I perceive the opening of any leader? I think openness is always a wonderful trait if it is a true and honest openness, if it isn't just a game that is being played, if it's a serious openness. And understanding that our security depends on this means that this would be a positive result. But I don't always believe people at face value. I don't believe people's words. I think it is the actions of politicians that prove what they say. And there need to be concrete steps taken for de-escalation. And so I think you mentioned that this is just a situation of pressure. And I think that today I don't know any person in Europe who could put strong pressure on the Russian Federation. Ending the occupation of our country is not something that's taking place yet. But talking about the stages, the first steps that Emmanuel mentioned, well, of course, it's the Normandy format, and we're very positive when it comes to the Sherpa meeting that will take place very soon. And I believe that if we have this openness, then this platform will give us the opportunity, our leaders the opportunity to show all their openness and to be able to show their cooperation, because there's been many slogans, many calls. You mentioned Finlandization. Emmanuel said he didn't speak about Finlandization. It's the first time that I've heard this term of Finlandizing the Ukraine. We are not offering to Ukrainize any other country, because we believe that every country is sovereign, and that is the beauty of it. Recently, a Belarusian person had stated that if there is escalation on Russia's behalf, they would immediately cut off hydrocarbon energy supply. How can I react to this? How should I react? Well, I asked to be given the statistics on trade exchanges between Belarus and Ukraine. These amount to 6 billion, 1.5 billion in exports from Ukraine to Belarus, and 4.5 billion in exports from Belarus to Ukraine. And so, if states decide to stop trade exchanges between the countries, who's going to suffer? Well, it's people on the ground who are going to suffer. This is something that will only lead us to a sort of caveman action, because people would suffer from this. And if we're talking about losing 6 billion, it's not Ukraine that would actually be a winner in this situation either. So when you're talking about honest steps, I think it's important to bear this in mind. Thank you very much. We no longer have any time for questions, but our event will continue, and we will now see the signature of the bilateral documents.
Well, you've been listening live there to a press conference in the Ukrainian capital, Kyiv. The French President Emmanuel Macron speaking, and the Ukrainian leader as well, Volodymyr Zelenskiy.